Hey everyone, and welcome to our second week of distance learning, um, and quite possibly one of the last times that you'll have to watch a video on the crit process. From here, I I hope that we can have conversations about the process, and looking forward into whenever we're all together. We will still be using the crit process in order to analyze passages, but it's not going to be so much where I go into in-depth about how to do it. Rather, we're just going to talk about the overall nuts and bolts and how we might be able to improve the process. So by now you should have completed the crit process over one important passage from your summer reading. Now I want to talk about how you move from analyzing a single passage to a work as a whole. And now, while the process is still the same and there's not too many additional steps, it does require additional planning and a little bit more rigorous thinking. So to kind of like help you out in a couple of questions that I think that you should be considering whenever you're reading a text from the very beginning are the following. You'll hear me talk over and over again throughout the rest of this course that we need to be thinking about why authors wrote a text to begin with. What did they see was lacking in their current social situation, and that they felt like that their voice was important enough to be shared. Another thing you want to be thinking about is why did the author choose one technique over another? One that I like to particularly focus on because I think there's a lot of good information and understanding that can come from it is the choice between different narrators. Why would a narrator choose for the I or the self to be narrating in a first person versus the second or third? You'll see in a second that I'm going to talk about Of Mice and Men, and in Of Mice and Men, Steinbeck uses a third-person omniscient, meaning that the narrator has access to all the characters' thoughts and can kind of like basically jump in and out of different parts of the world as it pleases. Kind of like if you think about it like God. A God character would understand everything about a given context. Next, how could this text be viewed as culturally or socially important? Many times throughout history, we see where books inspire conversations. You can even think about like with Harry Potter. Whenever I was growing up, Harry Potter was a really big thing because a lot of parents felt like that it celebrated witchcraft, and in a deeply religious society like the South, that was seen as inappropriate. And so there was a big conversation going on. Should Harry Potter be banned? Because not everybody's going to agree with it. And then last, what ideas carry throughout the text? The best authors are going to make sure that any themes or ideas that they're trying to get across are kind of like pounded in your head. Every single little piece of the text is going to point towards this much larger issue, or point towards some level of understanding about the world or one particular interpretation. And it's important to be looking for that and to understand why it's happening in the first place. So I apologize, this is a pretty large portion of text. Once again, I'm going to post the PowerPoint so it'll be available for you. But I just wanted to break down how the crit process could be extrapolated or morphed into a much larger essay. So you'll see here at the top, of course, as you all know, an introduction is extremely important. And in this introduction, you want to determine and decide a controlling idea that is observable in your text. Now, just a little aside here, observable doesn't necessarily mean that it has to be physically present, but rather you are able to make the argument that it exists. That's the great point about this essay process, is that you're trying to demonstrate your own understanding of the text and your own interpretation and evaluation of the work and its importance to humanity. And you want to make sure that this controlling idea that you're observing can be supported by reoccurring techniques. It's really important that whenever you're creating your essay, crit passage, that you choose techniques that are going to be found multiple times. Once again, the narrator is a really great choice because typically an author is going to maintain the same narrative voice throughout the entire work. If the techniques do not occur throughout multiple passages, or they do not have a strong meaning or a strong connection to the meaning of the text, don't use it. Otherwise, you're just going to be tripping over yourself constantly throughout the entire essay. Once you have this controlling idea and the techniques that support it, that's going to be your argument. In the introduction, you want to make sure that you set out for your reader what you're going to be arguing so that they know exactly what you're going to be talking about through the rest of the essay. I put here under an advanced portion, you can also provide contextual details about the text or author. However, I don't really recommend this until we get further along into the essay writing process, because if you provide contextual details that don't necessarily enhance your writing, then it just kind of muddies it and makes it unnecessary. Frequently, I will recommend, whenever we're just starting out with essay writing, to keep it as your introduction as just your outline of your argument. So as an example, I put here using Of Mice and Men. So my introduction would be just this sentence. In Of Mice and Men, Steinbeck uses an omniscient third-person narrator and realistic dialogue to illustrate the hardships migrant workers experienced during the Great Depression. We know that Steinbeck is taking this moment in history and telling a story about it. And the way that he tells that story is with third-person narrator and realistic dialogue. Realistic dialogue means that instead of trying to be super fancy formal and have dialogue as we might want it to be, like in a perfect world where nobody makes any grammar mistakes. Instead, Steinbeck makes it very colloquial, meaning that he writes as the characters would speak normally in life, and they're uneducated and they're lower class individuals, so the dialogue comes across as uneducated and lower class. After you've gotten your introduction, then you want to move in to your crypt passages. Now you're going to write 3 paragraphs that do the crypt process on 3 different passages. Now what's fairly important is that these passages need to demonstrate whatever your argument is. So you'll see here that I'm talking about hardships with migrant workers and an omniscient third-person narrator and realistic dialogue to illustrate that. Then this passage, my first passage, needs to demonstrate a hardship experienced by migrant workers, and it also needs to focus on the use of a narrator dialogue. If you're going to do that, you're going to need that same process throughout the other 2 passages. These other 2 are also going to need to demonstrate a hardship, and they're also going to need to focus on narrator or dialogue. You don't need to have, I chose to do 2 techniques just because I feel like that it gives you a little bit more distance. So if you ever feel like you're getting stuck with one particular technique, then you have another one to fall back on. If you can demonstrate some argument using just 1 technique, that's awesome. If you feel like that you need 3 techniques, I think that gets a little bit too stretched for this particular assignment, but if that's something that you feel comfortable with, do it. Last paragraph is going to be your conclusion. And in this, you really kind of want to point towards the larger issues at stake here. Why should we care as a reader? And how does Steinbeck's novel, with its illustration of these migrant workers, how does it connect to our current society? What does it show about humanity? And here at the last, I kind of included a very short concluding paragraph. It's very unpolished, and I'm not very proud of it, but I do think that it illustrates what I'm trying to get across. So throughout Of Mice and Men, Steinbeck uses the characters of George and Lenny as mouthpieces for his social agenda. He's trying to demonstrate something about what needs to take place, demonstrating that without compassion and understanding, humanity is doomed to repeat its tragic mistakes. That gets across what Steinbeck was doing and why we should believe, or why we as humans should care about it. So the final step of the crypt process is to reflect on your argument. You want to go back and read through what you've written and ask yourself a couple of questions. 1, are there any passages that disprove my argument? So if you are talking about how migrant workers, or how Steinbeck is showing the hardships of migrant workers, and then there's a passage in there that demonstrates that there weren't any hardships for the migrant workers, then that's a potential problem, and that's something you need to take into consideration whenever you're writing your essay. Next, are there any techniques that could have made my argument stronger? Oftentimes, whenever we reach the end of our writing, there's that nagging little gadfly in the back of our mind that's like, oh, I wish I would have analyzed this technique instead. I just didn't feel very confident in doing it, but I feel like there's a stronger argument here. That's important. I mean, I'm not necessarily saying that you should go back and use it if you don't know how to, but it is important to understand and start that conversation within your own mind on how it can be used next time. What's the potential problem with my analysis? Many times, especially with y'all, this is a new process, and so I feel like that you're going to think that there's a lot of problems with your analysis, and that's okay. I mean, this is a growing process, and I think that it's really important to start on this journey. It does require a lot of additional thinking, and I know that a lot of feedback that I receive is that it's tough and it's confusing, and that's okay. Too often we want something to just fall into our laps and not struggle, especially in our world where, like literally everything is available at our fingertips. It's a very rewarding process to face down the struggle and then come out on the other side with something that is uniquely your own. And then last, how could my statements be improved? That's your writing. How could your connections be made stronger? How could you make a better statement about humanity, etc. So that's just a rundown of the turning the crit writing process into an essay. You have throughout the rest of this week in order to write this essay. Of course, I'm going to be available to discuss your essays with you, and then I'm going to get to look at all of your crit writing assignments to see where we might have some potential pitfalls or areas of misunderstanding, and I'll be able to help you with that as well. As always, please reach out if you're having any difficulties. Please join teams so that we can have a one-on-one conversation and be able to talk it out from there, because I know that if you didn't understand it in my writing, then me responding to your email, you're probably not going to understand it still. So much love, everyone, and see you soon.